All right, George, welcome to another Consultants Corner here from the team at 10x.
Great to be here.
Yeah, so we know your first name, but why don't you just give us a recap, your first name, last name, and your title at 10x?
Yep, George Crocker, and I am a senior collaboration manager.
Very good, cool. So George, tell us a little bit about your professional background.
So I guess there's two halves of it. I spent about 10 years in strategy consulting working for Monitor Group, which is now part of Deloitte. And I was based in Hong Kong and did quite a lot of work with consumer products companies. And then for the next 10 or 12 years, I've actually been running consumer products companies as a CEO or general manager in Australia, New Zealand, and in Boston. And my work with 10x is sort of my nights and weekends job to keep myself entertained. So I try to combine my strategy, training, and my executive experience to bring some value to 10x's clients.
That's awesome. And they have the best consultants with the coolest backgrounds. So it sounds like you fit that bill.
I've heard that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So talk to us a little bit about, summarize, the background of a key consultant like yourself who's worked, clearly got a good tenured background, who's worked on some different 10x projects in, the growth strategy space and the market assessment space. So I guess talk to us and summarize some of what you do with the client projects as they relate to growth strategies and market assessments.
I guess there's a couple of skills that are important to work in this type of environment. The first is that unlike in a traditional consulting firm, you don't have a big hierarchy with layers of junior people underneath you to do the pick and shovel work. So you need to be quite skilled and quite quick at doing the basic analytics. But at the same time, you've got to have the perspective and the business judgment to extract what's important and to help the client make decisions so you don't all get lost in the woods. And I seem to have that combination of being able to see the forest and the trees. And so I quite like the model, and I quite like working for 10x clients.
Got it. No, and I've heard that before, that they kind of throw the traditional consulting model on its heels, so to speak, in terms of the value that they bring. So that's great. The next point we want to talk about, George, is around what sort of projects that you've worked on with the 10x team. So maybe if you could talk through a couple of projects that you've worked on as it relates to growth strategies, that'd be great.
Sure. A couple come to mind. I mean, as I mentioned, I have a food background. I worked with a large food client in the States who was a global company trying to think about innovation. And innovation is something that all consumer products companies think about, all companies think about. This happens to be a B2B food company. So their thinking about innovation was not so much, how do I come up with a better yo-yo, but rather, how do I provide innovation services to my customers to help them come up with a better, whatever it's going to be, protein shake. And they had a pretty strong hypothesis going in that they were going to invest quite a lot of money against. And we helped them unpick that and realize that there's probably only a very small subset of that idea that was worthy of investment. So we probably saved them a lot of money, but then helped them focus their investment on a more promising part of the original hypothesis. So that was quite interesting.
Yeah. Interesting. So you talked about innovation and then focus. It sounds like, or at least focus on the right growth opportunity. And those sounds like it was kind of the recipe, no pun intended, for the success of this food group.
Absolutely. Another one comes to mind, which is also quite relevant to a lot of companies, which is a question around digital marketing. And this is a company who actually made headphones, and they were looking at how some of the other leading headphones companies were using digital marketing and influencer-based marketing to try and establish themselves as a fashion item or as a design item or as a must-have, rather than going a traditional advertising or broadcast route. So, if I think about a lot of the work that I've done, if you look at innovation and digital marketing, these are the things that everyone's thinking about. And it's the type of thing that we're able to add a lot of value to clients through the 10x model.
Interesting. So they launched a product, And to your point, they were really, I wouldn't say concerned, but they didn't want to go the traditional advertising product launch route. They wanted to find out if there was an influencer who could help them catapult the launch of that product.
Yeah, both whether there's an influencer, but more conceptually, how do the better technology companies use influencers in general
Yeah.
to create a following for their products?
Yep, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I've always said that influencer-based marketing works about 90% of the time, and about 10% of the time it doesn't work because your influencer ends up being a dud or a criminal or something of that nature. So, but most influencer marketing is really powerful. It doesn't matter if you're influencer or your paid sponsor or the person of the face of your brand is controversial or not. It drives awareness and engagement and eyeballs to your brand. So that's really cool that they were taking a look at a new type of digital marketing, because influencer marketing hasn't been around all that long.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So what value, as you're going through this process, George, and you're going through the process of, like 2 examples you talked about earlier, what value are we really bringing to a potential 10X client and a 10X prospect?
Yeah, so I think the model, which is an expert interview-based model, is very unique. I think that's these days probably the best way, if not the only way, to uncover anything new to say. I think old research methods are quite commoditized, and honestly, most companies can do them themselves pretty well and pretty inexpensively. So I think the model itself is fantastic. But secondly, when you have collaboration managers who have a lot of experience, they don't feel like they need to demonstrate value by page count in a presentation. They really want to kind of cut to the value add. And, if you want all the detail, you can read the interview notes, but I'm going to just summarize so we can have a dialogue in a short amount of time about what's going to add value to your business. So I think having collaboration managers who operate at that level and in that style, I think it's very valuable to clients.
Got it. No, that makes sense. And the 2 things that I heard you say, or the 3 things I heard you say, were the expert model over the traditional model, and as well as quality over quantity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. That's great. George, this has been a great spend of my time. Thank you so much for talking to us today on another Consultants Corner from the team here at 10X.
Always a pleasure. Great to work with 10X. Take care.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
See ya.